I booked them a ski chalet in Whistler for Christmas, $14,000, and I found out I wasn't invited when my sister-in-law posted photos on Instagram. That's how I found out, not a phone call, not even a text. A carousel of photos, my in-laws toasting with mulled wine by a stone fireplace, my husband's brother grinning with a bottle of Moet, and the caption, "Nothing like family at Christmas." I was in our apartment in Calgary when I saw it. Sitting on the kitchen floor actually, because I'd been wrapping the last of the gifts I'd bought for everyone. The tape dispenser was still in my hand. I want to be very clear about the timeline, because people are going to wonder how this happened. They're going to ask why I didn't see it coming. And the honest answer is that when you love people, when you've spent years making yourself smaller so they can feel bigger, you stop expecting them to explain themselves. You just absorb it. You tell yourself there's a reason. You wait for the call that never comes. This is the story of how I stopped waiting. My name isn't important. What matters is that I'm 31 years old, I'm a project manager for a mid-sized construction firm in Calgary, and 3 years ago I married a man I genuinely loved. I still love him, actually. That's the part that makes this complicated. My husband, I'll call him my husband throughout, because that's what he was, is the second of 3 boys in a very close family. His parents retired to Kelowna about 5 years ago. His older brother and sister-in-law live in Edmonton. His younger brother, still in university, lives at home with my in-laws part of the year. When I married into this family, I tried hard. I want that on record. I drove the 7 hours to Kelowna for long weekends. I remembered everyone's allergies. I learned how my mother-in-law liked her coffee. Oat milk, no sugar, a splash of vanilla, and I always had it ready when she walked into our kitchen. I sent birthday cards by actual mail because she mentioned once that she missed receiving them, and I made good money. Better money than my husband, though we never made a big deal of that. My father-in-law is the kind of man who does not love knowing that his son's wife out-earns his son, so we kept it quiet, but it meant that I was the one who paid for things. Dinners, the Kelowna trips, the flights when my in-laws came to Calgary. I didn't mind, genuinely. I thought that's what family did. The chalet idea came from my mother-in-law. She mentioned it in passing the previous January, something like, "Wouldn't it be lovely to do Whistler for Christmas someday, all of us together?" And I took that and ran with it. I researched for 3 weeks. I found a place near Creekside with 6 bedrooms, a hot tub, ski-in ski-out access, a kitchen big enough to actually cook Christmas dinner in. I put down the deposit on my credit card. $14,240 for the week. I told my husband, who seemed genuinely excited. He told his parents and the response was enthusiastic. His mother sent me a long voice message about how thoughtful I was. His sister-in-law texted me 3 heart emojis and a snowflake. I spent the next 11 months coordinating dietary restrictions, arrival times. I booked the ski rentals because my father-in-law's knees aren't what they used to be, and I'd found an adaptive equipment place nearby. I planned the Christmas dinner menu. I ordered a custom advent calendar from a small shop in Vancouver and had it shipped to Kelowna ahead of time, so my mother-in-law could open a door each day in the lead-up. I did all of this because I thought I was part of this family. My husband was supposed to fly with me on December 21st. We'd booked our flights months in advance. On December 18th, he sat me down at our kitchen table and told me he'd moved his flight to the 19th because his parents had asked him to come early and help with the drive. I said that was fine. I meant it. I told him I'd see him there. On December 19th, he flew to Kelowna. On December 20th, I got a text from my mother-in-law. I've read it so many times since that I could reproduce it word for word, but I'll paraphrase. She said the family had talked it over and they felt it would be better if I came later, maybe the 26th, after Christmas itself. She said she hoped I understood that it was nothing personal, just that my father-in-law wanted the immediate family together for the actual holiday. I read that text 4 times. Then I put my phone face down on the counter and stood at the kitchen window for probably 10 minutes watching the snow come down over the rooftops. Immediate family. I was his wife. I was the person who booked the chalet. I texted back, I see. Does my husband know about this? She replied. Of course, sweetheart. It was actually his idea to give us this time. I called him. He answered on the 3rd ring. He didn't sound surprised that I was calling. That, more than anything else, told me everything. He said it in the careful, measured tone of someone who has rehearsed. He loved me. This wasn't about our marriage. His parents just needed this time. It was only a few days. I'd understand if I could just step back and see it from their perspective. I said, I paid for the chalet. He said, I know. And we really appreciate that. They had already become a we that didn't include me. I hung up. I sat down on the kitchen floor and then I opened my laptop. Here is what most people don't know about booking a luxury chalet through a property management company. When you are the one who paid, when your name is on the booking confirmation, when your credit card is the one on file, you are the guest of record. You have rights that the people sleeping in the beds do not. I called the property management company in Whistler at 8 o'clock that night. I explained that due to a family emergency, I would need to make some changes to the reservation. I asked what my options were. They were very helpful. I also spent that night going back through 11 months of receipts. Ski rental deposits, the grocery pre-order I'd placed for the chalet, the Christmas crackers and the special BC wines I'd had shipped directly, the advent calendar, the transportation I'd arranged from the airport. My sister-in-law had posted on Instagram at 9 p.m. They were already there. Already pouring the moet I'd had waiting in the chalet's wine fridge. I did not sleep that night. But I was very calm. I find I get very calm when I'm angry enough. By morning I had a plan. I want to be careful here about exactly what I did and didn't do, because I'm not someone who acts out of spite. Everything I did was completely within my legal rights. Every single step. I canceled the ski rental bookings. They were in my name. I received a full refund to my credit card because I was still within the cancellation window. I contacted the property management company again and canceled the grocery pre-order that was set to be delivered to the chalet on December 22nd. Full refund. I called the wine merchant in the Okanagan and canceled the order for the 6 bottles of wine I'd had shipped to the chalet in advance. The property manager agreed to hold them until a courier could pick them up on my behalf. The advent calendar I had already sent to Kelowna. That one I couldn't take back. But everything else? Everything that had not yet been consumed, I reclaimed. And then I made the call I'd been thinking about since approximately 8:15 the previous night. The chalet itself, the $14,000 booking, I did not cancel. Canceling would have cost me the deposit and I was not interested in paying for a vacation I wasn't attending. Instead, I called the property management company and explained that I had a family conflict and would need to check in myself on December 21st as planned. I was the guest of record. They confirmed my arrival. Then I booked myself a flight to Vancouver, not Whistler, Vancouver. I had a friend from university living in Kitsilano, and she had been trying to get me to visit for 2 years. I texted her, "Are you home for Christmas? Can I come?" She replied in under a minute with a string of exclamation marks. I packed a bag. I watered my plants. I gave my neighbor a key and asked her to check on things while I was gone. And on the morning of December 21st, before I went to the airport, I made one more phone call. My mother-in-law picked up on the second ring. I was sitting in my car in the parkade at YYC with my luggage in the trunk. I had written out what I wanted to say the night before, but in the end I didn't need the notes. I told her that I wanted her to know I had received her message and I had spoken with my husband. I told her I hoped they were enjoying the chalet. I said I was calling to let her know that the ski rentals had been cancelled, as they were in my name, and she'd need to make separate arrangements if anyone wanted to ski. I mentioned that the grocery delivery wouldn't be arriving, and that the wine I'd shipped would be collected by a courier in the next day or two. I told her I was so glad the advent calendar had arrived safely. Then I told her to have a wonderful Christmas with her immediate family. She was quiet for a long moment, then she said in a very different tone than I'd ever heard from her, "You can't do this." I said, "I absolutely can. Everything I canceled was purchased by me on my credit card, in my name. I hope you have a wonderful holiday." She started to say something else, but I ended the call. My hands were completely steady. I went inside and caught my flight to Vancouver. I want to tell you about those 4 days in Vancouver, because I think it matters. I want you to understand that I was not sitting in a hotel room crying. I was not refreshing my phone and waiting for someone to come after me. My friend picked me up from YVR in her little Civic that smelled like coffee and dog. She has a rescue greyhound named something ridiculous, a long complicated name that I will not repeat here because it's private, but the dog pressed its enormous head into my lap in the back seat, and I cried exactly once quietly, for about 2 minutes, and then I was done. We spent Christmas Eve walking the seawall. We got pho in a little place on Broadway that she'd been going to since we were in first year together. On Christmas Day we made her family's recipe for pierogies, her family's Ukrainian-Canadian tradition, and we watched 3 movies in a row and her dog slept across both of our laps and I felt genuinely like a person again. My phone was busy. I put it on Do Not Disturb and checked it twice a day. My husband called 9 times on December 21st alone. My mother-in-law called 4 times and then began texting. My father-in-law, who had, in the 15 years I'd known him, called me personally perhaps twice, called on to December 22nd. I didn't respond to any of them until December 23rd, when I sent a single group text to my husband and his parents. I'm safe and with a friend, I'll be in touch in the new year. Please enjoy the chalet. My sister-in-law texted me separately. I found it interesting that her message was not an apology. It was a question about whether I had also cancelled something called the charcuterie delivery. I had not been aware there was a charcuterie delivery. I had not ordered a charcuterie delivery. I told her that. She didn't respond. I came home to Calgary on December 27th. My husband was already back. He was sitting in the living room when I walked in, and the look on his face was one I'd never seen on him before. He looked like a person who had spent 4 days understanding something he didn't want to understand. He tried to apologize. I let him talk. He said his parents had been difficult to be around once the food situation became clear. He said his mother had blamed him. He said they'd had to drive 40 minutes each way to a grocery store to replace the basics, and that his brother and sister-in-law had been furious about the wine. I said, "I'm sorry that was stressful for you." He said, "That's all you're going to say?" I said, "What would you like me to say?" He looked at me for a long time. "I didn't know they were going to tell you not to come. I want you to know that." I said, "You moved your flight and came early when they asked you to. You didn't call me when they told you their plan. You answered the phone when I called and asked me to step back and see it from their perspective. You knew." He didn't argue with that, which told me everything. The next several weeks were hard. I'm not going to pretend they weren't. My husband and I started seeing a couples counselor, a woman with an office near 17th Avenue who had a fish tank in her waiting room, and the particular skill of asking questions that felt kind and then turned out to be devastatingly precise. We went every 2 weeks through January and February. His parents called to apologize twice. The first call from his mother was mostly an explanation. She felt they didn't get enough time as a family. She'd been struggling with empty nest feelings since my husband and his brothers had grown up. She hadn't meant for me to feel excluded. She hoped I understood. I thanked her for calling. I told her I would need some time. I did not say that what I actually understood was that she had chosen a moment when she knew I was already feeling like an outsider to make me officially one, and she had used the 1 week a year I could be guaranteed to want to belong. The second call was from my father-in-law. That one was shorter and more direct. He said he owed me an apology and he was giving me one. He said he was sorry. He didn't explain or justify. I respected that more than I expected to. My sister-in-law never called. The thing that changed the most was not my relationship with my in-laws. It was my relationship with myself. I had spent 3 years being the person who absorbed, who accommodated, who picked up the tab and sent the voice messages and remembered the oat milk. I had been so focused on being accepted by this family that I had not noticed, truly genuinely had not registered, that being accepted and being valued are 2 entirely different things. My counselor asked me once in our 4th session what I would have done if a colleague had treated me the way my mother-in-law treated me. I said I would have escalated to HR within 48 hours. She just looked at me, and I understood the question. By March, I had stopped driving to Kelowna, not as punishment. Just because when I examined it honestly, I did not miss going. What I had missed was the feeling of belonging I'd believed I was building there, and I had to accept that the feeling and the reality had not been the same thing. My husband and I are still together. I want to be honest about that, because I know it's the part people will find most controversial. We're together, but differently. He started doing things I hadn't asked him to do before. Coming home earlier, making dinner without being prompted, telling his mother no when she called with requests that fell within what used to be my jurisdiction. Our counselor calls it him growing into accountability. I call it him being the person I hoped I'd married. It's slow, it's not a fairy tale, but it's real. Last spring, my mother-in-law mentioned casually over a video call that she thought it might be nice to do a cottage rental for the long weekend in July, and maybe I could look into some options. I smiled at the camera. I said, "That sounds like a great idea. I'd love to help plan something, as long as we're all there this time." There was a pause, and then she said, "Yes, of course, everyone would be there. I am under no illusions. People do not transform in 3 months. But I also know something now that I didn't know the night I sat on the kitchen floor with tape in my hand. My presence is not optional. My contribution is not invisible. And the next time someone tries to make me feel like I am a guest in my own family, I already know exactly what to do. I have very good cancellation policies.